When you work in a cafe, you get used to seeing the same people. Morning routines, afternoon study sessions, and the pair who never tips but always divides a muffin. After working here for over 2 years, I've gotten to know most of the individuals that come in, and I even know some of them by name, like Mark. One of the more reserved regulars, Mark always arrived at the same time just before the morning rush, ordered a black coffee, and sat at the farthest table by the window. He was the kind of customer you hardly noticed until he noticed me. He was never aloof, just aloof, and never made small talk or lingered. He always paid in cash. I had just finished boiling milk for a latte a week after I had relocated when I felt like I was being watched. I looked up. Mark was at his usual table watching me, which was strange because he never watched anyone. I forced a polite smile before he turned back to the espresso machine, brushing it off as if I was dreaming. Then, when I handed him his coffee, he spoke first, which was also strange because he never started conversations. I blinked. Sorry. Mark tilted his head slightly. In your apartment you like it made my stomach drop. I hadn't told anyone I moved for a second, and I wasn't sure how to react. I hadn't mentioned moving at work, I hadn't updated my address on social media, and I hadn't told anyone but my landlord and a few close friends. Mark should not have known. I forced a laugh. How did you? Mark just smiled, lucky guess, and left before I could question him. The fact that he said it so casually, as if we had discussed it before, made my skin crawl. I spent the rest of my shift trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, but the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early, and I told myself that I just wanted to clear my head before the rush, but in reality, I wanted to see if Mark would say anything else at 7:45 a.m. Sharp Mark stared at me yesterday, his face inscrutable, and he moved toward the counter with the same blank look in slow, methodical strides. I stiffened as I rang up his customary black coffee, my fingers hovering over the register before I forced myself to speak. You never answered my question. I swallowed hard, wondering how he knew I had moved. He gazed for a while, then smiled the same kind but vacant grin as yesterday. You just seem different, he murmured softly, suggesting that maybe this was a new beginning. The way he said it, as if he knew something I didn't, caused my hands tighten into fists, and I felt my stomach churn. It wasn't a response, but rather a diversion. Just like yesterday, Mark took his coffee and left, and I stood there frozen, watching him sit by the window as if nothing had happened. By the time my shift ended, I had persuaded myself that I needed to check my apartment, and the first thing I did when I got home was make sure my locks were deadbolt locked. Windows closed tightly, nothing seemed amiss, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was about to give up when I noticed something that made my skin crawl, the coat rack near my door. I always kept 3 jackets on it, one for work, one for cold days, and one that I hardly wore at all, but now there were only 2 left, and the third was gone. I stood there, gasping for air, wondering if I had moved it or stuffed it in a closet and forgotten. I checked the hallway outside my apartment, but nothing was there, and it was just gone. A slow, chilling realization crept up my spine. Someone had been in my apartment, and whoever they were, they had taken something small that I wouldn't notice right away. I locked the door and backed away from it, my mind racing, and then, as if the universe wanted to confirm my worst fear, my phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. "Red looks good on you." My throat went dry. I didn't own anything red except the missing jacket. A wave of nausea hit me. I forced myself to type out a response. "Me, who is this?" No answer. I tried calling straight to voicemail. I felt exposed, vulnerable. Watched. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my key, shoved my phone into my pocket, and left, because right now I couldn't be in that apartment, and if Mark knew where I lived, I wasn't going back there alone. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I crashed on my friend Matt's couch instead, though I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone standing outside my door, or worse, already inside. And the text "Red looks good on you," it wouldn't leave my head. Who sent it? How did they get my number? And most importantly, was it Mark? By morning I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't live in my apartment knowing someone had been inside. I had to figure out how they got in. So after a few hours of debating, I finally forced myself to go back. Matt offered to accompany me, but I declined. I'm not sure why. Perhaps I was worried about coming across as paranoid, or perhaps I just didn't want anyone else to realize how terrible this was. Regardless, I went alone, and as soon as I entered, I knew something wasn't right. The air felt different, like someone had been there, but nothing seemed out of place. There was no forced entry, and no broken locks. I took another look in the closet. When I turned to face the mirror, I noticed something written on it, not in marker or pen, but in steam, as if someone had stood in my bathroom after taking a shower and used the condensation to leave me a message. The jacket was still missing, so I did something I hadn't done before. At first, everything seemed normal: the sink, the shower, the toothbrush, which I had left out in a hurry this morning. I backed out of the bathroom as my breath came in shallow bursts. The texts, the missing jacket, the message on the mirror, and my stomach turned into knots as I moved closer. The faint letters became clearer, and then I saw two words: "See you." I felt my knees weaken because I hadn't taken a shower that morning, meaning whoever wrote this had been in my apartment while I was away. I quickly left the flat after grabbing my keys, hardly remembering to lock the door. As soon as I was outside, I contacted the police and handed them all of my messages. When I told them about Mark and how he knew I had moved before I told anyone about how he always watched me, their interest peaked, so they asked, "Do you have any proof that he's been inside your apartment?" I hesitated. "Do you have any proof that he's been inside your apartment?" To my surprise, they actually took me seriously. An officer met me at my apartment and did a full walkthrough, checking every room and every possible entry point. There was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. "No," the officer groaned, "and at this point, the only thing we can do is file a complaint and replace your locks. Be careful who you talk to, and call us right away if anything else happens." 2 weeks ago, Mark stopped coming to the cafe, and his usual table by the window was empty. No one seemed to care where he went, and the strangest part was that there were no more strange texts or signs of anyone inside my apartment. It seemed like whoever had been watching me had moved on, and I should feel relieved and safe, but I don't, because someone still has my jacket, my phone number, and someone who knew exactly where I lived before I told anyone decided to vanish. But I don't think they're gone. I think they're just waiting for something I don't know, and I don't want to find out. I've never given grocery shopping much thought. I simply go in, get what I need, and go. It's a normal, monotonous experience. which is why I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary when I entered the store that evening, just after 8 p.m. A few people were milling about, pushing carts, checking labels, and going about their own business while the fluorescent lights cast a dull glow over the aisles. I grabbed a basket and began going through my list, which included bread, eggs, coffee, and the usual, nothing unusual. But after 10 minutes or so, I heard the intercom crackle to life and a voice speaking overhead. "Please come to the store's front, Alex." The voice stated my name clearly, and I briefly paused, thinking I had misheard. I looked around, expecting to see someone searching for me, possibly a colleague who had seen me shopping or someone I knew making a joke, but nobody was listening. Customers scarcely noticed the news as they continued with their daily activities. When I got to the customer service desk, the woman behind the counter smiled politely and asked if I could help someone named Alex. I said, "Someone just called my name over the intercom," and she blinked, but I don't think I heard it, so I frowned. I didn't make any announcements, and as far as I know, no one else did either. I looked at the intercom phone that was on the desk with the receiver still in place, and I looked around at the staff behind the registers, but none of them seemed to be paying any attention to me. Who had called my name if no one had made the announcement? The woman behind the customer service desk hesitated, then looked at her coworkers. One of the managers, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a tired expression, walked over "Everything okay?" I repeated what had happened, expecting him to at least take it seriously, but he just gave me a puzzled look. I stood there for a few seconds trying to process what the cashier had just said. No one had made an announcement that wasn't possible, and I had heard it clearly as day. I asked, my voice coming out tighter than I intended. "The intercom is only accessible by employees, and none of us have used it in the last 10 minutes. I looked at the other employees behind the registers, and they were all busy scanning groceries and assisting customers. None of them seemed even remotely interested in me. "We don't have any record of an announcement being made. Do you record them?" I asked. He shook his head no. I stroked the back of my neck in an attempt to get rid of the nagging anxiety. "If none of you announced it, how did my name be called?" The manager exhaled slowly as if he was trying to be patient. "Perhaps you misheard? Occasionally, the system detects interference or static." I almost believed him, but static doesn't say my name, so I forced a nod despite my gut telling me something wasn't right. Maybe he then turned back to the customer service representative and said, "If you need anything else, let us know." That was it. The conversation ended, and I left feeling foolish. I could have misheard or imagined it, but as I grabbed my basket and made my way back toward the aisles, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I was being watched. The store's usual hum felt different, and every little sound made me tense. When I arrived at the self-checkout, I felt uneasy due to the beeping of the registers and the soft rustling of the things being stocked. I was nearly finished scanning my items with unsteady hands when the intercom crackled once again. "Alex, please come to the front of the store." I whipped my head up so fast my vision blurred. It was the same voice, calm, even unnerving. I turned toward the customer service desk expecting the employees to react, but no one did. Not a single person even looked up. My heart pounded. I looked around the store searching for anyone who had heard it too. Nothing. It was like I was the only one who had heard my name. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. I needed to get out of here now. I grabbed my He hurried toward the exit and pushed through the automatic doors into the cold night air. The parking lot was mostly empty, a few scattered cars, the glow of the street light stretching long eerie shadows across the pavement. I reached my car and unlocked it with shaking hands, throwing my groceries into the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment, trying to slow my breathing. What the hell just happened? Then, out of habit, I checked my phone. I wish I hadn't, because there was a new notification on my screen, a text message from an unknown number. "You forgot something, Alex." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. I didn't respond, didn't move. Then another message: "Turn around." I didn't. I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the parking lot, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I didn't stop until I was halfway home, heart hammering in my chest. I forced myself to glance in my rearview mirror. The parking lot was far behind me, empty, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I didn't go straight home. Something told me that would be a mistake. Instead, I drove to a well-lit gas station a few miles away, pulled into a spot near the entrance, and locked my doors. I went for my phone while my hands were still trembling. I looked at the previous message, turned around, and wasn't ready to start. Taking a deep breath, I tapped on the unknown number and blocked the person, preventing them from contacting me again. I then retrieved my call log and dialed the local police department's non-emergency number. "What's your emergency?" I was unsure of what to respond after hearing my name yelled over the shop intercom and receiving a spooky text. None of that was illegal, but I sensed something wasn't quite right. I said, "Hello, I think someone has been following me." The dispatcher's tone changed right away. "Are you in a safe place?" I asked. "I'm at a gas station. Can you describe what's happening?" I exhaled slowly. "At the grocery store, someone called my name over the intercom twice. When I asked the staff, they informed me that no one had made the announcement. After I left, I received a text from an unknown number saying, 'I forgot something,' and instructed me to turn around." "Do you think someone might have been watching you inside the store?" I swallowed hard. "Did you notice anyone following you to your car?" I thought back to those final few moments in the parking lot. The prolonged dark shadows. "Do you want us to send an officer to look at the shop surveillance footage?" I went quickly, so I wasn't searching for the eerie emptiness. I questioned whether they would even do that if you felt unsafe, because we take that seriously. She asked if you wanted an officer to meet you where you were. I looked around the gas station and saw some people coming in and going out, as well as cars pulling up to the pumps. I told her that I wasn't alone, but that it would be helpful if someone could look at the video. She took down the information and promised to follow up with the store. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number, which briefly made my stomach turn, but then I learned it was the police department, so I responded right away. "Hello, this is Officer Reynolds." I thanked her and hung up, but even as I sat there locked in my vehicle, I felt watched. "You reported a suspicious incident at the grocery store last night." I asked quickly if you had found anything. The officer paused, and we looked at the security footage. He said slowly, "You were right, no employees used the intercom." I shuddered when your name was called. I already knew that, but hearing it confirmed made my skin crawl. However, we did discover something else, and the way he said it chilled my blood. "You left the store at 8:52 p.m. We don't know," the officer said, adding that he kept his head down the entire time with his hood pulled over his face so no one recognized him. He said that at 8:54, a man left the store through a side entrance, walked to the parking lot, and stopped at the edge to watch your car as you drove away. I gripped my phone tighter. I took a deep breath. Did he follow me? We don't believe so. According to Reynolds, he stayed there for long before leaving the camera. We're attempting to follow him on the other security cameras. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding, and he called my name. We don't know how he did it, but he acknowledged that the intercom system isn't wireless and must be used from one of the store's phones. We checked all of them, but I heard it. I said, barely raising my voice above a whisper, I believe you, but we don't know how it happened yet. I shakily exhaled. What should I do? Keep an eye out, he said. I thanked him and hung up, and for the next few days, I was on high alert, changing my routine, taking different routes home, and constantly checking my surroundings, but nothing happened. It's been a few months since I stopped going to that grocery store, stopped shopping at night, and never ever disregarded my gut because I know what I heard and I know someone was watching, but I'm not sure why or if they'll ever return. The person who called my name that night and stood in the parking lot watching never showed up again, or perhaps they did and I simply didn't notice.